Welcome to African Folktales by Kate. If you're just seeing us for the first time, please like and subscribe for more unique African tales. The name Prince used to be a heavy thing, a name that tasted like gold and sounded like the beat of a royal drum. In the ancient city of Benin, stories were told of his great-grandfathers, men who wore crowns of ivory and commanded thousands of warriors with a single wave of a hand. But as Prince sat on a cracked plastic chair in a noisy corner of Lagos, those stories felt like lies. He was 26 years old, and the only thing he commanded was a stomach that growled in hunger every time the smell of fried fish wafted from the nearby food stalls. The sun in Lagos was angry that afternoon. It beat down on the rusted zinc roofs, making the air ripple with heat. Prince wiped sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief that had seen better days. He looked down at his shoes. They were black leather shoes, once shiny and expensive, but now the soles were so thin he could feel the heat of the pavement through them. He was a prince by blood, but a beggar by reality. Around him the world was moving fast. People were shouting, yellow buses were honking their loud, tired horns, and hawkers were weaving through traffic with crates of cold water on their heads. Prince felt like he was standing still while the rest of the world was running toward a future he couldn't reach. He pulled out his phone, the screen was cracked in 3 places, and opened his bank app. He didn't even need to look, but he did anyway. The balance was 0. Had been 0 for 3 weeks. Just then, the sound of a very powerful engine cut through the noise of the market. It was a deep, low growl that made the ground vibrate. A white Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon, so clean it looked like it had been dipped in milk, slowed down right in front of the shack where Prince sat. The windows were tinted dark, so dark you couldn't see who was inside. But Prince knew that car. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that car. It belonged to Segan. The window rolled down slowly, revealing Segan wearing gold-rimmed sunglasses and a heavy chain that sparkled in the sun. Only 2 years ago, Segan was wearing the same worn-out shirts as Prince. They used to share a single plate of noodles because they couldn't afford 2. But now, Segan looked like he owned the sun. "My prince!" Segan shouted over the loud music playing inside the car. The song was a popular hit about making money and spending it. "Why are you sitting here in the dust? Don't you know your throne is waiting for you at the club?" Prince felt a sharp pain in his chest. It wasn't a physical pain but the pain of shame. "I'm just resting, Segan," Prince replied, trying to make his voice sound steady. "The heat is too much today." Segan laughed, and the sound was like glass breaking. "The heat is only too much for those who are trekking, my friend. Inside here it is like winter in London. The AC is freezing me." He reached into the center console of the car and pulled out a thick bundle of 500 naira notes. He tossed it through the window, and it landed in the dirt at Prince's feet. "Buy yourself some cold water. And maybe a new shirt. You are royalty, remember? You shouldn't look like a ghost." Before Prince could even say thank you or throw the money back, Segan sped off, leaving a cloud of dust and the smell of expensive perfume in the air. Prince looked down at the money. A few people nearby were staring at him. He could see the pity in their eyes, and it felt worse than the hunger. He picked up the money and tucked it into his pocket. His hands were shaking. That evening, Prince went back to his room. It was a one-room apartment, in a building that looked like it was tired of standing up. The walls were covered in patches of mold, and the ceiling had a large brown stain where water leaked through whenever the clouds cried. He sat on the edge of his small mattress and stared at a picture of his mother. She lived in a small village far away, and every time they spoke on the phone, she told him how proud she was of her royal son. She believed he was working in a big office in Lagos, wearing a suit and making the family name great again. "I can't do this anymore," Prince whispered to the empty room. "I am a descendant of the Oba. I was not born to pick money from the dirt." He took out his phone and dialed Segan's number. It rang for a long time before Segan picked up. The background was loud with the sound of girls laughing and bottles popping. "Segan, it's me," Prince said. "I'm tired of the dust. I want to know how you did it. I don't care about the risk. I don't care about the stories people tell. Just show me the way. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. The music in the background seemed to get quieter. Prince, Segan said, his voice much more serious now. There is a reason I don't talk about it. Once you step onto this path, there is no turning back. You have to be ready to lose things that money cannot buy. Are you sure? Prince thought about his leaking roof. He thought about his mother's old, torn wrapper. He thought about the shame of the afternoon. I am sure, Prince said, his heart beating like a drum. I am more than sure. Okay, Segan said. Pack a small bag. Only the things you need. Don't tell anyone where you are going. Not even your mother. I will pick you up at 4 a.m. We are going to Ibadan. There is a man there who knows how to talk to the earth. If the earth likes you, you will never be hungry again. But if it doesn't, well, let's just hope it likes you. Prince hung up the phone. He stood up and began to pack. He took one last look around his small, miserable room. He felt a strange chill, as if a cold wind had just blown through the closed window. He felt like someone was watching him from the shadows in the corner, but when he turned to look, there was nothing there. He didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window, watching the moon move across the sky. He kept thinking about the stories his grandfather used to tell him about the ancient spirits of the land. His grandfather always said that the spirits don't give anything for free. They only trade. But Prince didn't care about trading his peace for a G-Wagon. He didn't care about trading his soul for a mansion. He just wanted the world to stop laughing at him. At exactly 4 a.m., the white G-Wagon appeared at the end of the street, its headlights cutting through the morning mist like the eyes of a predator. Prince picked up his bag and walked out, closing the door to his old life behind him. He didn't know that for the next 7 days, he wouldn't see the sun. He didn't know that the price of becoming a king in the modern world was far more terrifying than anything he had ever imagined. As he climbed into the car, Segan looked at him and didn't smile. The journey has started, Prince. Keep your eyes open and your heart closed. From now on, you are not a son of a king. You are a hunter. And the forest we are going to is very, very hungry. The car drove away, leaving the city of Lagos behind. They headed toward the ancient hills of Ibadan, where the secrets of the old world were still hidden in the dark, and where a wooden coffin was already being prepared for a prince who wanted to be a god. The road to Ibadan felt like a journey into another world. As the white G-Wagon sped away from the bright lights and concrete buildings of Lagos, the landscape began to change. The tall skyscrapers were replaced by giant, ancient trees that leaned over the road like old men with secrets. The air turned cooler, smelling of damp earth and crushed leaves. Inside the car, Segan remained silent, his eyes fixed on the winding road ahead. The loud music he usually played was turned off. The only sound was the hum of the tires on the asphalt, a sound that felt like a countdown. Prince sat in the passenger seat, his hands gripped tightly around the straps of his bag. He watched the sunrise, but the light didn't feel warm. It felt like a warning. Segan, Prince whispered, his voice cracking. This man we are going to see. Is he a doctor? A herbalist? Segan didn't turn his head. He is none of those things, Prince. He is a gatekeeper. He stands between the world of the living and the world of those who have passed on. In Ibadan they call him the Great Ifa, but he is older than the name itself. Remember what I told you. Do not speak unless he asks you a question, and no matter what you see, do not run. If you run, the spirits will think you are playing a game, and they do not like to play. They pulled off the main highway and onto a dirt path so narrow that the branches of the trees scratched against the sides of the expensive car. Finally they reached a clearing. In the center stood a small, circular hut made of red mud, with a roof of thick palm fronds. There were no other houses for miles. The silence was so deep it made Prince's ears ring. As they stepped out of the car, the door of the hut opened. A man walked out, but he didn't look like a priest from the movies. He was thin and walked with a slight limp, wearing a simple white cloth wrapped around his waist. But it was his eyes that stopped Prince in his tracks. They were completely white. No pupils, no color. Just a milky, glowing white that seemed to look right through Prince's skin and into his very bones. "The Prince of Benin has arrived," the old man said. His voice didn't sound like it came from his throat. It sounded like it was coming from the ground beneath their feet. "You carry the blood of the great Oba, yet you come here seeking the crumbs of the earth. Why does a lion want to eat like a vulture?" Prince felt his knees trembling. He remembered Segan's warning and kept his mouth shut. The Ifa priest walked closer, his white eyes fixed on Prince. "You are tired of the dust. You are tired of the shame. You want the world to bow to you like they bowed to your ancestors. But your ancestors earned their crowns through blood and courage. You want yours through a shortcut." He pointed a long, bony finger toward a corner of the clearing. Under a massive Iroko tree sat a long wooden box. It was a coffin, freshly carved from dark wood. It looked heavy and cold, sitting there in the dirt. 7 days, the Ifa priest said. "You will lie inside that box. I will bury it just deep enough so the earth can hear your heartbeat. You will have no food. You will have no water. You will have no light. If you can survive 7 days of darkness, the spirits will grant you the secrets of wealth. They will tell you the words to speak so that money flies into your hands like birds. But if you cry out, if you beg to be let out before the sun sets on the 7th day, your soul will stay in that hole forever." Prince looked at Segan, looking for a sign of hope, but Segan was staring at the ground. Prince looked at the coffin. It looked like a mouth waiting to swallow him. He thought of his mother. He thought of the zero balance in his bank account. He thought of the shame that had been eating him alive for years. "I will do it," Prince said, his voice surprisingly loud in the quiet forest. The priest nodded slowly. "Strip off your clothes. You brought nothing into this world, and you will take nothing into the earth." Prince removed his shirt and trousers, standing only in his boxers. He felt small and naked under the giant trees. He climbed into the coffin. The wood felt rough and smelled of sap. As he lay down, the space felt incredibly tight, pressing against his shoulders. "Close your eyes, Prince of Dust," the priest whispered. The lid was placed over the box. Prince heard the heavy thud of the wood meeting wood. Then came the sound of metal being hammered, nails being driven into the lid to lock him in. Clang, clang, clang. Each strike felt like it was hitting his heart. Then he heard the sound of shovels. Fizz. The sound of dirt being thrown onto the coffin. The air inside started to get warm. The sounds from the outside world grew fainter and fainter until there was nothing left but the sound of his own breathing. Day 1 was a battle with his mind. He tried to count the seconds to keep track of time, but he kept losing his place. The darkness was so thick it felt like a heavy blanket pressing on his eyes. He felt his skin itching, imagining spiders and beetles crawling over him in the dark. He wanted to scream, but he bit his lip until he tasted blood. By day 3, the thirst was a monster. His tongue felt like a piece of dry leather in his mouth. His throat was so tight it hurt to swallow. This was when the hallucinations began. He heard his mother's voice. "Prince, come home. The corn is ready. Why are you in that box, my son?" He reached out his hands to touch her, but his fingers only hit the cold, hard wood of the coffin lid. He realized with a jolt of horror that he couldn't even turn his body. He was trapped. On the 5th day, the shadows became alive. He wasn't alone in the coffin anymore. He felt a cold breath on his neck. He heard whispers that sounded like his own voice, but twisted and evil. "Give up, Prince. You're just a boy playing a man's game. Your ancestors are laughing at you. Look at the great prince, dying in the dirt for a car." Suddenly, the darkness shifted and he saw a vision. He saw himself sitting on a throne of gold, but his hands were covered in black oil that wouldn't wash off. People were cheering for him, but their faces were blank, with no eyes or mouths. The devil appeared to him, not as a monster with horns, but as a businessman in a perfect suit who looked exactly like Prince. "You want the power?" the vision asked. "Then stop fighting the dark. Let it in. Become the dark." Prince stopped fighting. He stopped trying to count the days. He stopped feeling the thirst. He let his mind drift away from his body. He began to hear the music of the earth, a low, humming vibration that told him where gold was hidden, which people were greedy, and what words to type on a computer screen to make a stranger thousands of miles away send him their life savings. The spirits were teaching him. They were rewriting his brain. On the seventh day, the sound of shovels returned. The dirt was cleared away. The nails were pulled out with a screeching sound that felt like teeth on a chalkboard. When the lid was lifted, the light of the evening sun hit Prince's face. He didn't jump out. He climbed out slowly, his movements stiff like a puppet. His skin was pale and covered in grave dust. His eyes, once full of fear, were now cold and flat. He looked at the Ifa priest, who was smiling a toothless, terrifying smile. "The prince is dead," the priest said, bowing his head. "Long live the king." Segan stepped forward, holding a bottle of water, but Prince brushed it away. He didn't feel thirsty anymore. He felt powerful. He felt like he could reach out and pluck the moon from the sky. "Check your phone," Segan whispered. Prince reached for his bag and pulled out his cracked phone. It shouldn't have had any signal in the middle of the forest, but the bars were full. He opened his bank app. The zero was gone. In its place was a number so large he had to count the digits twice. 20 million naira. And as he watched, the number jumped to 25 million. Then 30. "It worked," Prince whispered. But his voice didn't sound like his own anymore. It sounded like the dry, rubbing stones of the Ifa priest. He looked back at the coffin. For a split second, he saw himself still lying in there. His eyes closed, his royal blood turned to ice. He shook his head and the image vanished. He walked toward the G-Wagon with a stride that was no longer a trek, but a march. He had his wealth. He had his crown. But as the car drove away from the red mud hut, Prince didn't notice that his shadow on the ground was no longer following him. It was leading him. The world Prince returned to was no longer the same world he had left behind. In the weeks following his return from the forest of Ibadan, it felt as though the very air around him had changed. When he walked down the streets of Lagos, people didn't just look at him. They cleared a path. There was a coldness that radiated from his skin, a silent authority that made even the bravest men lower their eyes. He was no longer the struggling boy with thin shoes. He was a man who moved with the weight of a secret kingdom behind him. The money did not just come. It flowed like a river after a heavy storm. Every morning, Prince would wake up in his new mansion in Lekki, a house so big that he sometimes got lost in the hallways, and the first thing he would do was check his phone. The notifications were always there. Mysterious transfers from accounts in countries he had never visited. Payments for consultancy services he never provided. The spirits were keeping their word. They were whispering into the ears of people across the ocean, guiding their fingers to send their fortunes to the descendant of the Oba. Prince surrounded himself with the finest things money could buy. He bought a mansion where the floors were made of polished white marble that felt like ice under his feet. He filled his garage with cars, a red Ferrari, a black Range Rover, and a gold-painted G-Wagon that put Segan's car to shame. He wore suits that cost more than his father had earned in a lifetime. He draped heavy gold chains around his neck, trying to replace the weight of the crown of dust with the weight of real metal. For the first 3 months, Prince lived in a golden dream. He threw parties that lasted for days. The most beautiful women in Lagos crowded his living room, drinking champagne that cost $1,000 a bottle. His friends, many of whom had laughed at him when he was poor, now called him chairman and leader. They ate his food, drank his wine, and told him he was the greatest man to ever come out of Benin. Prince would smile and nod, but inside he felt nothing. It was as if the 7 days in the coffin had frozen his heart. He went back to the village once, driven by a convoy of 3 cars with sirens clearing the way. When he reached his mother's small house, he didn't even get out of the car at first. He looked at the old, crumbling walls and felt a sense of disgust. He ordered his men to give her bags of money and expensive lace fabrics. His mother, however, did not look happy. She stood in her doorway, looking at the shiny cars and the armed guards, and her eyes were filled with a deep, aching sadness. She walked up to the window of Prince's car. "My son," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What is this? Where did this wealth come from?" "It is my time, Mama," Prince said, looking at his gold watch instead of her eyes. "I told you I would make the family name great again. You will never have to farm again. I am building you a palace in the city." "I don't want a palace, Prince," she said, a tear rolling down her cheek. "I want my son. Your eyes. They look like the eyes of a man who is looking at a grave. There is a smell of dry earth on your clothes, even though they are new. Please, tell me you haven't traded your peace for this." Prince grew angry. The spirits inside him hated her questions. "Take the money, Mama, and be quiet. I am the Prince of Benin. I have finally taken my throne." He rolled up the window and signaled his driver to leave. As the car sped away, he looked in the rearview mirror and saw his mother standing in the dust, her hands clasped in prayer. He felt a sharp pang of guilt, but he quickly pushed it down. He had no room for guilt in his new life. By the 4th month, the dream began to turn into a nightmare. The scratches started first. At night, in the silence of his massive bedroom, Prince would hear the sound of fingernails clawing against the marble floor. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It sounded exactly like the sound of his own nails against the coffin lid in Ibadan. He would jump out of bed and turn on all the lights, but there was never anything there. Then came the hunger. No matter how much expensive food he ate, steaks, lobsters, spicy soups, he felt like his stomach was empty. He would eat until he was sick, yet he would still feel the same hollow, gnawing hunger he felt on the 3rd day in the box. He started to lose weight. His expensive suits began to hang off his frame. His skin took on a grayish tint, the color of ash. The mirrors were the worst. Whenever he passed a mirror in his house, he would catch a glimpse of someone standing behind him, a tall shadow with white, milky eyes. But when he turned around, the room was empty. He started covering the mirrors with black cloth, but he could still feel the eyes watching him from the corners of the ceiling. Exactly 5 months and 3 weeks after he left the shrine, the first glitch happened. Prince was at a high-end car dealership, looking to buy a new sports car for a girl he had just met. He handed the salesman his black titanium credit card. "I'm sorry, Chairman," the salesman said, looking confused. "The machine says, insufficient funds." Prince laughed. "That's impossible. Check it again. There is enough money in that account to buy this whole street." The salesman tried again and again. "It's declined, sir. It says the account does not exist." Prince pulled out his phone to check his app. His heart stopped. The screen didn't show his balance. It showed an image of a wooden coffin lid. And then the phone went dead. It wouldn't turn back on. He rushed home, his mind racing. "It's just a mistake," he told himself. "A technical error." But when he arrived at his mansion, the gates wouldn't open. The electronic sensor didn't recognize his thumbprint. He had to climb over the wall like a thief. When he finally got inside, the house was freezing cold. The electricity was off, but the lights in the neighbors' houses were shining brightly. He walked into his bedroom and pulled the cloth off the big mirror. He didn't see his own reflection. He saw the Ifa priest from Ibadan, sitting in a chair that wasn't there, smiling that toothless, terrifying smile. "The 6 months are almost over, Prince of Dust," the priest's voice echoed in the room, though his mouth didn't move. "The earth has finished its loan. Now it is time to talk about the interest." "I did what you asked," Prince screamed at the mirror. "I stayed in the box. I did the work." "The box was only the beginning," the image in the mirror replied. You wanted to be a king, but you forgot that a king must provide a sacrifice to keep his kingdom. The money has stopped. If you want it to flow again, you must return to the hills. You have 7 days before the darkness you left in the coffin comes to take the rest of you. Prince fell to his knees on the cold marble floor. The wealth was vanishing as fast as it had come. His cars in the garage began to rust before his very eyes. The expensive paintings on the walls turned into dry leaves and fell to the floor. The mirage was over. The prince was back in the dust, and this time, the price of getting out would be higher than his own life. He stayed on the floor all night, shivering. He knew he had no choice. He couldn't go back to being the boy with the thin shoes. He couldn't let Segan and the others see him fall. As the sun rose on the first day of his final week, Prince stood up. He looked like a man who had already died. He didn't pack a bag this time. He just walked out of his crumbling mansion and started the long journey back to Ibadan, the whispers in his ears louder than they had ever been. The road back to the hills of Ibadan felt like a journey to a funeral. Prince did not arrive in a convoy of cars this time. He did not have sirens to clear the path or guards to protect his body. He arrived in a dusty, battered commercial bus, squeezed between traders and laborers. He sat by the window, his eyes sunken and dark, watching the trees go by. Every time the bus hit a pothole, Prince felt a jolt of terror in his chest. He felt like a man running out of oxygen, counting every breath as if it were his last. When he finally reached the edge of the sacred forest, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and blood red. The forest seemed even thicker than before, the thorns reaching out to tear at his expensive but dirty clothes. By the time he reached the red mud hut, his hands were bleeding and his breath was coming in short, ragged gasps. The great Ifa was waiting for him. He was sitting on the same wooden stool, his milky white eyes staring into the distance as if he could see things that were miles away. He didn't look surprised to see Prince. He looked bored, like a man watching a movie he had already seen 1,000 times. "You are late, Prince of Benin," the priest said, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "The shadows have already started to eat your house in Lekki. By tomorrow, your cars will be nothing but piles of scrap metal. The spirits do not like to wait for their payment." Prince fell into the dirt, his forehead touching the ground. "Help me, Baba. I will do anything. I tasted the life of a king, and I cannot go back to the dust. The hunger. The scratching sounds. I cannot take it anymore. Tell me what I must do to make the money stay." The priest leaned forward, and for the first time, a small, cruel smile touched his lips. "The 7 days in the coffin was just the test to see if you were strong enough to hold the power. But to keep the power, the earth demands a permanent anchor. You have used up the grace of your ancestors. Now you must provide a soul that belongs to you. Not a stranger. Not a friend. Someone whose blood is your blood. Someone who loves you more than they love themselves." Prince's heart stopped. He knew what was coming. The image of his mother's face, wet with tears as she watched him drive away, flashed in his mind. "Your mother," the priest whispered. "She is the only one who can pay the interest on your loan. If you bring her here, and we offer her soul to the hills, the money will return. Not just millions but billions. You will be the richest man in Africa. You will live for 100 years, and your name will be written in gold. But if you refuse, the madness that is already biting at the edges of your mind will swallow you whole. In 7 days, you will forget your own name." Prince shook with a violent chill. "My mother. But she is all I have. She prayed for me when I was a beggar. And now she can save you from being a madman," the priest replied coldly. "Choose, Prince. Her life or your mind. You have 3 days to bring her here. If she is not on this ground by the 3rd day, the darkness wins." Prince spent the night wandering the forest, screaming at the trees. He called himself a prince, then a monster, then a king. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw himself eating out of a dustbin, his clothes torn, his royal blood forgotten. The fear of being nothing was more powerful than the love he felt for the woman who gave him life. He traveled to the village the next morning. When he arrived at his mother's house, he didn't act like the cold chairman he had become. He acted like the boy she remembered. He hugged her and cried, telling her he had realized his mistakes. "Mama," he said, wiping his eyes, "I have realized that all this money is nothing without God's blessing. There is a great prophet in Ibadan. He wants to pray for us so that our family will be protected forever. Please come with me for just 3 days of prayer." His mother, whose heart was as soft as a cloud, believed him instantly. She packed her small Bible and her best wrapper. "Oh, my son, I knew you would come back to yourself. I have been fasting and praying for you every day. Let us go. If it will bring you peace, I will walk to the ends of the earth with you." The journey back to the shrine was silent. Prince felt like he was carrying a lamb to the slaughter. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Every time his mother reached out to pat his hand or tell him she loved him, he felt like a dagger was being twisted in his heart. They reached the clearing on the evening of the first day of the ritual. The Ifa priest looked at the mother and nodded. "The sacrifice is pure," he muttered. He told Prince that the ritual would take 3 days and nights. The mother was placed inside the hut, where she was told to sit in the center of a circle drawn with white chalk. Prince was told to sit outside by the iroko tree and watch the fire. He was told that no matter what he heard, he must not enter the hut until the priest came out. The first night was filled with the sound of chanting. Prince sat by the fire, his hands over his ears. He could hear his mother's voice from inside the hut. She wasn't screaming. She was praying. She was calling his name, asking the prophet to bless her son, to give him a long life, to take away his sorrows. Each prayer felt like a hot coal being pressed against Prince's skin. On the second day, the atmosphere in the forest changed. The birds stopped singing. The wind stopped blowing. It felt like the world was holding its breath. The chanting grew louder, more frantic. The Ifa priest's voice sounded like it was being joined by hundreds of other voices. Deep, growling voices that didn't sound human. Suddenly, a massive storm gathered out of nowhere. The sky turned black as coal. Lightning, bright and blue, began to strike the trees around the clearing with deafening cracks. The wind became a hurricane, ripping the leaves from the branches and throwing them into the air like confetti. Then, a sound came from inside the hut that made Prince's blood turn to ice. It wasn't a prayer. It was a scream of pure, absolute terror. "Prince! Prince, help me! Something is pulling me!" Prince jumped up. His mother's love was fighting with his greed. He took a step toward the hut, then stopped. "The money," he whispered to himself. "If I go in, I lose the money. I'll be a madman." Another scream, louder this time. "Prince! My son! Save me!" The greed in his heart cracked. The prince inside him, the one who cared about his lineage and his mother's smile, finally woke up. He didn't care about the G-Wagon. He didn't care about the mansion. He just wanted his mother. He rushed toward the hut and kicked the door open. "Mama! I'm coming!" But what he saw inside was not a ritual. The Ifa priest was standing in the center of the room. His body arched backward at an impossible angle. His white eyes were glowing so brightly they lit up the whole hut. But he wasn't chanting anymore. He was gasping. A bolt of lightning, more powerful than all the others, struck the roof of the hut. The sound was like a bomb going off. Smoke and dust filled the air. Prince was thrown backward onto the ground outside. When the dust cleared, the forest was silent. The wind had died down as quickly as it had started. Prince scrambled back into the hut on his hands and knees. "Mama! Mama!" His mother was lying in the corner, unconscious but breathing. But in the center of the room, the great Ifa lay on his back. His white eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling, but they were no longer glowing. His body was scorched and black, as if he had been burned from the inside out. He was dead. The ritual had been interrupted by the very spirits he tried to control. The bridge was broken. Prince grabbed his mother and pulled her into his arms, weeping. He had saved her life, but as he looked at the dead priest, he remembered the warning. 7 days. If the ritual is not finished, the darkness wins. The 6th day was ending. The sun was disappearing. And in the distance, Prince could already hear the sound of the shadows coming for him. The money was gone. The priest was dead. And the madness was only hours away. The forest was deathly quiet after the storm, a silence so heavy it felt like it was crushing the air out of Prince's lungs. He sat on the dirt floor of the hut, cradling his mother's head in his lap. Her breathing was shallow, but she was alive. In front of them, the charred body of the great Ifa lay like a piece of burnt wood. The eyes that had once looked through Prince's soul were now dull and sightless, staring at a ceiling that was no longer there. Prince knew he had to move. The 6th day was fading into the 7th, and he could feel the edges of his mind beginning to fray like an old rope. The whispers were no longer outside of him. They were bubbling up from within his own brain. They sounded like 1,000 radio stations playing at once, some laughing, some screaming, all calling his name. "Mama, wake up. We have to go," he urged, his voice trembling. He lifted her up, her body feeling as light as a dried leaf. He carried her out of the hut, stumbling over the roots and thorns that seemed to reach out to trip him. Every step felt like he was walking through thick mud. He didn't look back. He knew that if he looked back, he would see the shadows rising from the dead priest's body to follow him. By the time they reached the main road, the sun had fully set. The 7th day had begun. Prince felt a sharp, stabbing pain behind his eyes. He saw flashes of light, gold coins, dripping blood, the wooden lid of the coffin, and his mother's smiling face, all swirling in a dizzying circle. He put his mother on a bus heading back to the village, pressing the last few notes of his cash into her hand. "Go, Mama. Don't look for me. Just go," he whispered, his eyes unfocused. "Prince, come with me. You are sick, my son," she cried, reaching out for him as the bus started to move. "I am a king, Mama," Prince said, but his voice was hollow. "And a king must stay with his kingdom." As the bus disappeared into the night, the final string in Prince's mind snapped. The transition was not slow. It was like a candle being blown out by a cold wind. Suddenly, he forgot why he was standing on the road. He forgot about the mansion in Lekki. He forgot about the white G-Wagon. He even forgot the face of the woman who had just been crying for him. 7 days after the storm in Ibadan, a new man appeared in the heart of Benin City. He was a man who lived in the corners of the King's Square, near the bronze statues of the ancient heroes. He wore a crown made of orange peels and braided tall grass. His clothes were nothing but tattered rags, yet he carried himself with a strange, tragic dignity. He walked with a long, dirty stick that he called his scepter, waving it at the cars that honked at him. "Clear the way for the Oba," he would shout, his voice echoing against the walls of the modern shops. "The gold is coming. The spirits are typing the code. Check your phones, the alerts are coming." The people of Benin City grew used to him. Some would throw a small coin his way, while others would laugh and point. "Look at that one," they would say. "Another Yahoo boy who went to Run Plus, and it backfired. The spirits have taken his brain." They didn't know he was a real prince. They didn't know he had royal blood flowing through his veins. To them, he was just another warning, a living ghost of greed. Prince lived in a world of his own. In his mind, he was still in the mansion. The dirty water he drank from the gutter tasted like expensive champagne. The scraps of food he found in the dustbin felt like a royal feast. The voices in his head never stopped talking to him, reminding him of the secrets of wealth, but he no longer had a phone to receive the alerts. He was a billionaire in a kingdom of shadows. In the village, his mother never stopped mourning. She sat by the roadside every day, selling roasted corn to travelers. Every time a young man in a fancy car drove past, she would shield her eyes and look closely, hoping to see the face of her son. She would pray for the man who tried to kill her, because she only remembered the boy who had hugged her and called her Mama. One evening, a young boy from the neighborhood sat near Prince at the market square. The boy was hungry and was looking at a shiny car parked nearby with eyes full of longing. Prince, with his crown of orange peels tilted to one side, looked at the boy and grabbed his arm with a surprisingly strong grip. "Don't look at the metal, small one," Prince whispered, his white-filmed eyes suddenly clearing for a brief second. "The metal is made of sand. The gold is made of blood. If you sleep in the box to become a king, you will wake up as a slave to the dirt." The boy was scared and ran away, but he never forgot the words of the madman. Prince sat back down on his throne, a discarded car tire, and looked up at the moon. For a moment he remembered a name. Prince. He smiled, a toothless, sad smile, and began to hum an ancient song of the Benin Kingdom. The wind blew through his rags, carrying the smell of dry earth and old secrets. He had wanted to be a king whose name would be written in gold, but he had become a story told in whispers to children who wanted to grow up too fast. The wealth was a lie. The power was a trap. And the Prince of Benin, the descendant of the great Oba, remained in the dust, guarding a kingdom that didn't exist, waiting for a renewal that would never come. Prince's downfall wasn't just his greed, but his impatience. He tried to bypass years of hard work by using a spiritual shortcut. The lesson here is that wealth that does not grow from your own labor has no roots. Like a tree without roots, it will surely fall when the first wind blows.